They are Professor Grace Pannell, Professor of Accounting in Emory University, Goizueta Business School. Professor Pannell also served as Vice President of American Accounting Association. She is specialized in accounting standard setting, and global capital market. Welcome, Professor Pannell. Our next panelist is Dr. Clark Lee, Partner and Director of Burlington Global Investment Research. He is a PhD, CFA, and CPA. Clark joined Burlington from Shanghai Stock Exchange in China, where he served as the Executive Manager of Research Department. Welcome, Dr. Lee. Last but not least, Professor Chen-Ping Lee, Professor of Political Science in Kennesaw State University. His research interest is in the area of international political economy, including trade disputes, trade negotiations, and political risks. Welcome. With that, let me hand it over to Jingran Zhao, who is a PhD student in Emory, and she will be the moderator for this panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jingran Zhao. I'm a second-year doctoral student at Emory, and my research interest is firms' information environment and capital market, and international accounting, and particularly Chinese capital market. So with that being said, I'm very excited to be here and talk about Chinese business environment and public policy. So I think we'll start with a self-introduction first, a brief self-introduction, and then we'll have some questions about public policy and Chinese business environment. And if you have more time at the end, we'll have question and answer section from our audience. Start from Dr. Pannell.
My main claim to fame is that I'm Jim Grant's advisor. And that I know a tiny, tiny percentage of what these gentlemen know. I am studying the initial listing patterns of Chinese firms, including listings in Shenzhen and Shanghai, but also listings in Singapore and Germany and London and New York, and a special focus on Chinese reverse mergers, which if you've been reading the newspapers is all the hot news these days. Chinese reverse mergers are where a Chinese firm buys a U.S. shell company that already has a listing, merges itself into the Chinese shell or into the U.S. shell company, and becomes a U.S. company listed on the stock exchange without going through the listing requirements.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here. I think every time, because we're dealing with students, it's exciting to see student organizations take initiative, organizing conferences like this, promoting knowledge and information about the areas where they interest them the most. So as a professor, I greatly appreciate this effort and congratulate you on outstanding job. I'm interested in international political economy. As you can see, there's not a whole lot that intersect between the two things. One of the things I'm interested in is to look at investment protection, especially from the angle of bilateral investment treaties that China has signed with over 130 countries now on a bilateral basis, how to protect investors. And what we have seen is that there's an interesting patterns developed on that. So that's my research interest. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Clark Lee. I'm very happy to be here as a part of the panel discussion. In fact, every time when I come to Emory, I feel very happy. One reason is I already meet to Dr. Pannell and Dr. Lee, and my wife is also working with the Emory University. Okay, so today very happy to be here. For me, I am working in a local investment firm called Valentine. This firm started from mid-1980s, but we sold this firm to a bank in the early 2000 when this firm became the largest independent investment firm in the southeast area. But after the financial crisis, because our investment team and management team think another new business model we call the outsourced CIO model can serve the client even better. So we restarted the Valentine firm. We call it Valentine 2.0. Okay, very quick. This firm basically we are a global investment firm invested to all the major asset classes like global equity, global bonds, hedge funds, currency, commodities, private equity, basically everything. I'm in the firm lead the research efforts. Okay, thank you so much.
Well, we'll start with a very general question as a panel discussion. So what do you think is the outlook for the Chinese economy for the next 5 to 10 years? From various sources, it has been shown that the economy will slow down from different aspects.
I defer to my learned colleagues.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Probably because I'm a Chinese and I worked in China for some time. Okay. Let me just say very quick about something I thought. To answer this question, I think probably it's helpful for us to step back a little bit to see how China developed in the capital market over the past 2 decades. In fact, in my mind, I think about 20 years ago, the Chinese capital market almost zero. Because basically, Shanghai and Shenzhen Stock Exchange, Dr. Panau mentioned, started from the 1990s. Before that, basically no stock exchanges, no security firms, no mutual fund firms, no major investment institutions. So at that time, probably zero. But in the past 20 years, with the fast economic growth, Chinese capital market also, I want to say, grows very fast. Think about today, the overall Chinese stock equity market overall size, if we add Shanghai and Shenzhen together, probably around it's about 4 trillion US dollars. This has become the second largest equity market in the world, only next to the US. But of course, the US is so big. If we add Nasdaq and New York Stock Exchange together, probably today the market value more than 20 trillion. So even China today around 4 trillion, but still the second largest. And also China bond market today is one of the 5 largest bond market. 20 years ago, no any trading platform, but today, from the government standpoint, we can see there are 5 exchanges in Chinese market under Chinese regulation called CSRC. Basically 3 exchanges in Shanghai, 2 others, one in Zhengzhou, one in Dalian. Yeah, I want to say probably they made a great progress, but looking forward, I still think there are a long way to go. Let's say for stock market, today in China, this is a long-only market, no short tradings, no margin sales, even for any derivatives. China just started its stock index trading exchange in Shanghai about 2 years ago. And for the bond market, if we say this is one of the 5 largest, but compared with the US, too small. Bond market only 3.5 trillion. How big the US bond market? 10 times. 10 times. Even for stock market, 4 trillion, second largest, but compared with the economy side, today the China GDP probably around 7 trillion, by exchange 11 trillion, by purchasing power. So from the ratio standpoint, the Chinese equity market is so small compared with the US. So here, I want to say both equity and equity and the bond market will have a long way to go. And if we talk about hedge fund, private equity, still I think maybe even longer distance.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for that answer. That actually relates to my next question. Chinese capital market does have a long way to go, just considering the background, because the exchanges are built by the government. And a lot of the IPOs at the beginning are from the state-owned enterprises. But now with the economy going, there are more and more private enterprises, and they're dying for capital from banks or from other sources. But we know that the Chinese banks are more dominated by the government again. And a lot of the government are reluctant to loan to the private firms due to political reasons or the credit issues. So as we see from the news and the last presentation, we also talked about a lot of business from Wenzhou went bankrupt because they didn't have enough equity to support their growth and so on and so forth. So my next question is, what do you think are the future ways to raise capital for small and medium-sized enterprises in China? As we see, many firms have gone through the Chinese reverse mergers, and there are a lot of issues with that as well. But if they can't get loans from the major banks and the private market is not efficient enough, what do you see as the future? Is Chinext at Shenzhen Stock Exchange a good model for that?
So the Shenzhen Stock Exchange, Jingren has taught me this. The Shenzhen Stock Exchange has two facilities for listing the equities of small firms. One is the SME board of Shenzhen, and it lists mostly previously state-owned enterprises, and the other is Chinext, which mostly has private enterprises. The SME board is regulated by the government, and the listing requirements are enforced by the government, whereas Chinext has a panel of independent experts who are in charge of listing. So it seems as if Chinext is probably the wave of the future for the private firms that want to go public in China. But as I mentioned before, there are also lots of Chinese firms that go public in Australia or Singapore or Germany or London. Of the top 20 stock exchanges in the world, as Dr. Lee mentioned, the NYSE is the biggest by far. It's like 5 times as big as the NASDAQ, and the NASDAQ is the second biggest. So it pretty much dominates global equity, and there are lots of Chinese firms listed on NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, so that's one way for them to raise money. But of the 20 top stock exchanges in the world, 2 are from China, 1 is from Brazil, 1 is from Russia, 2 are from India. So of the BRIC countries, the developing market countries, they all have tremendous need for capital, and so they're all going to be competing for the capital available through Australia, Germany, London, New York, etc. So domestically, I think Chinext is probably the wave of the future. Internationally, there's a lot of competition for emerging market firms.
I would not, because I'll defer to my colleagues in terms of the capital market, and then a lot of technical details, they know much more than I do. But I'm just looking at the public policy perspective and raise a question, why is that the smaller companies will have harder time in raising capital, and what is the reason for that, right? Since the last stage of the state-owned enterprises reform, the grasping the big and letting go of the small, 抓大放小, has created these state-owned enterprises that continue to grow and continue to monopolize the market. And so, to some degree, they keep expanding and squeezing into the living space of the smaller companies, so they need to survive. And another thing relates to the health of the capital market. Has everything to do with transparency, with the legal requirements and the enforcement of rules and laws and so forth. I think these are the background issues that China is facing. It is true that its economy is slowing down, but of course that's in a relative term. Its slower growth is still much better in terms of the growth numbers than all these developed countries. But it is at the stage where it has to start looking at this kind of political economic intersections in which what will be the role of the public sector, of the government in the economy. And that, of course, the World Bank and the think tank in China talk about what to do with the state-owned enterprises in a proposal not too long ago. And I think that has something to do with the capital market and the general market as well.
Let me just add one point. Like our moderator said, basically 20 years ago, Chinese commercial banks dominate all the financial resources for the enterprises. And in fact, today, even after 30 years, reform, but still want to say commercial banks are still very important. We also mentioned that the state-owned firm. Look at it for the central government level. Right now, there are about 113 state-owned firms. They are the largest. They call them, national team across all the most important industries. Basically, I think those firms compared with 20 years ago, I would like to say probably have even more sources than before. And today, look at how the 5 largest commercial banks, 3 are in China, but their major target, their major objective is probably still provide private financial support for the state-owned firm. That we call the quality, how to grow the small and mid-sized firms. That's the reason I would say compared to their bigger peers, they still have some difficulty. Over the past years, Dr. Pano and Dr. Li mentioned that the Chinese government have tried to think about some kind of initiatives to give them financial support. For the Shenzhen Stock Exchange, they started, I think, the small mid-sized board in 2004, and ChinaNext, they call it in China called in 2009. I want to say this is all very successful. By in the last year, or ChinaNext, this board just focused on small size, high technology startups with low requirement getting into the exchange. Today, there are more than 300 firms already listed there. They raised about close to $50 billion fund. Pretty successful. There's a well-known investor called Mark Mobius. He's the emerging market manager with Franklin Templeton mutual fund firm. He managed about $40 billion. He said this is a very important turning point in China and in the emerging markets to how to find a way to fund the new startups. But this is still not enough. Like the former chairman said, the ChinaNext, this kind of platform, the target is to try to support only the most important critical emerging industries. Right now, if you go to CSRC, Chinese Central Government, you will find that there are several hundred firms in a waiting list. Try to get into the ChinaNext. It's impossible for everybody to do that. That's the reason, Jing Rang mentioned the reverse merger, because there's still a huge demand for capital in Chinese overall big market. That's the reason they find some other ways to try to get the fund. That's the one reason I think reverse merger just happened.
That leads to another question related to Chinese reverse mergers. Since the kind of the scandal came out that related to accounting issues or operational issues to the Chinese firms, their reputation has declined so much. So what do you think as a future the Chinese firms could do or the government could do to help these firms to list in US?
So I think there are some essential cultural differences between the US culture and the Chinese culture. If if I understand correctly, and I'm not an expert on the Chinese culture, but if I understand correctly, it's a lot more collectivist. And what we would think of as privacy, but what might also be characterized as secrecy, is much more a business condition than it is in the United States. In the United States, in the capital market, we really focus on transparency. We use financial reporting standards that investors can use. We make a practice of full disclosure as much as possible. We publicize what our corporate governance practices are, and as much as possible we conform to model corporate governance processes. This is a new thing in China. This is something China did not come by naturally, and as Chinese firms seek capital from non-Chinese investors, the thing that they could do that would help the most is to focus on transparency. So Chinese firms have recently adopted a version of international financial reporting standards, which are set by an international body in London, and that set of accounting and reporting standards focuses on transparency and disclosure. It's proven to be a problem for Chinese firms because the unrelatedness of parties who are reporting is essential in U.S. capital markets, whereas in China, so many of the entities are actually related to each other, and they're all related to the government. And so to be transparent about the practices that the firm follows is also to be transparent about the practices that the government follows, which is not necessarily a highly valued practice in China.
And I would agree with Dr. Pannell on that. And I think it's not just in the capital market or economy that China has this learning curve. It's also similar in government's conduct and foreign policies. And try to, after this 1978 reform, liberalization, and increased interaction with the rest of the world, China gradually started to learn the international norm. And gradually adjusted to it and adapted to it. So it's a process. And same thing, we talk about the business practice and the transparency, the rule of law and all that. They are moving in the right direction, but it's going to take time. This is one thing.
Yes, this is a very interesting topic when we talk about information disclosure, transparency, and even reverse merger. Probably maybe most of us know that there's a very interesting story several months ago. A firm called Sino Forest, a Chinese firm listed here in US, because a lot of concerns regarding the accounting issue for the firm, many big investors lost a lot of money. Probably you know that John Paulson, the very famous hedge fund manager, he just lost about 600 or 700 million just for this one investment. So here they raise a lot of, become a very critical questions for the whole world are asking today is how to trust the financial information for the Chinese firms. So I would say, for Dr. Pannell said this very, very well. First, this is culture issue. And Dr. Lee said, great, this for Chinese firms, they're still in the process of the learning curve. One reason I want to say that based on my experience with the Shanghai Stock Exchange, but they know that? Yes, Chinese guys also know that. They know accounting issue is the big issue. In fact, today's story about Sino Forest or whatever, we should not be surprised. Like Dr. Pannell said, 20 years ago, basically there is no any kind of capital market system. Even nobody know what's the very good or right accounting standard. And today I want to say, they try to know, they know the issue, they try to resolve the issue, have a closer collaboration with the US regulators, SEC, or some agencies. Also, they also try to learn more things about American accounting standard of information disclosure. One effort is this. Probably you heard about that for Shanghai Stock Exchange. They have been discussing this for a couple of years. That means besides today's main board, they try to open another board called an international board. Because today in Shanghai Stock Exchange, there are about 900 listed companies, but 100% Chinese companies. No any company from other countries. They are quite different from US, UK. New York Stock Exchange, 20% are listed firms from non-US firms. For London Stock Exchange, close to 50% non-UK firms. Shanghai, 0. So they try to get some big global firms come to list in Shanghai. One reason is this. They try to use their great experience for global firms to increase the transparency, to get to the global international standard for the accounting issues. I think that will get better in the future.
Dr. Lee, do you think Shanghai will be the next global financial center?
Do you want me to answer first? Okay, this is a very big topic. I want to say, from my personal experience, I started in Shanghai for about 3 years, and I worked in Shanghai for some time. Broadly, I want to say over the experience I was in Shanghai, I can say one thing is I was very surprised what Shanghai achieved, even how China achieved on the economic development side over the past decade. For Shanghai, I want to say right now, we say one of the largest equity market, one of the largest debt market in the whole world. But I think it's largely in line with the historical role. And we know about 60 or 70 years ago, Shanghai was basically one of the most important cities in East Asia. Today, if you go to Shanghai, ask a lot of people, probably will think, oh, today's achievement basically Shanghai try to reclaim its historical role. If you ask going forward, Shanghai will be even better, will become one of the most important global financial center. It's too early to make a judgment. I just want to with one quote from Dr. Fang Xinghai. Dr. Fang is the head of Shanghai Financial Service Office, basically the regulator of Shanghai financial development with the central government. He said, we understand New York or London, they didn't rise overnight. We didn't envision Shanghai will become one of the most important cities in the whole world in the near future. But we do believe it will be better. In fact, look at the central government. Chinese central government gave a target. They said want Shanghai to be one of the global financial center by year 2020. Basically, it's very hard to say how far it can go. But basically, I would say in the near future, the future pretty good. But there definitely had some issues it needed to resolve. One important issue is, I think all your probably will care about is the talent issue. They have very good infrastructures, very good office buildings, of even very good trading system. Let me making one thing this for Shanghai Stock Exchange. 1 year ago, they started a new electronic trading platform. That's the most advanced trading platform in the whole world exchanges. It can handle 10 times trading volume in New York Stock Exchange. Basically, I want to say, they don't want to see that, but I want to say they prepare for some big things. But they do have some challenge as the talent issue. Look at New York. How big the population in New York working in the Wall Street, in the financial sector? Basically 11%. Similar level as London, 10 to 11%. But in Shanghai, how much? 1.5%. So they need a lot of smart people. Without those smart people, they cannot go too far.
That kind of relates to.
So the first time I went to Shenzhen, I looked around and there were these very tall, very beautiful buildings. I remember lots of turquoise and marble, and it was an amazing financial center. And the person who was with me, who was from China, said 4 years ago this was just a village. So in terms of how fast they can develop, if they can put up a financial center as quickly as they put up Shenzhen, the sky's the limit. But the other thing that I would point out is that those big stock exchanges that I was talking about at the top 20, 2 from India, 2 from China, 1 from Brazil, 1 from Russia, those are users of capital. Those are clearinghouses for firms that need capital, and the capital has to come from someplace. So for a while, I think New York and London and Frankfurt probably have a lock on being the financial centers because they actually have the capital to allocate. So I think it's probably likely that we'll see a lot of the high flyers from China and India and Brazil come to the US for capital, and that'll still cluster in New York, Frankfurt, and London. But put up another Shenzhen and...
Well, since we're talking about capital inflow and outflow, we can talk about the direct investment. And this is one of the research interests for Dr. Li. So what do you think are some trends in China inwards and outward foreign investment?
China continues to attract a lot of foreign investments. There's no question about that. And in 2011, it has grown to, just for that year, about $116 billion inflow of the foreign capital. I think what's more interesting is the fact that China is exporting its capital, its investments, outward foreign direct investments. And just 2011, and it exported about non-financial related foreign direct investment is about 60 billion. And so that's half of what they take in. And another interesting thing is, where do they go? According to the official statistics, first of all, they went to Hong Kong. And then the 2 tax haven places, Virgin Islands and Cayman. So it was a little difficult to track where they go after that. But another interesting thing related to the outward Chinese investment is that some of them, after staying out, will come back in the form of foreign direct investment. This is called a round tripping. So they will take the money out of China, export, and then invest it somewhere, and then eventually at some point they bring it back in. So in other words, and to take advantage of their things. So that creates an interesting adjustment in terms of how much we need to do to discount the inflow as well as to discount the outflow. And the purpose of many of the outward Chinese foreign investments are into the areas of raw materials and energy. And that's one. And the second one is to get the brand names, the reverse merger. That's another possibility. And finally, deals with the market incentives to bypass some of the international trade barriers. They use that investment to accomplish that.
With that being said, what are some of the measures that governments and investors can take to protect their interests, such as reverse mergers? There are lots of parties that have lost their money in this kind of transactions.
One of the things they do is to sign this bilateral investment treaties with the government, between governments. And what this means is that if there is any nationalization or expropriation takes place, or any other political risk involved in this investment, then investors can have a recourse in trying to find ways to address this. Traditionally, you have to deal with the national court, but the purpose of this bilateral investment treaties is actually to allow some of the foreign investors to directly go to international arbitration. for that purpose, to bypass the domestic courts of the host countries. And that's a great incentive and great way to protect investors. But what's happening here is that prior to 1988, the way China signed this bilateral investment treaties is to protect its own sovereignty. So it tried to limit the scope of this bilateral investment treaties by saying that only if the disputes involves compensation relates to nationalization and expropriation, then you can bring it up for international arbitration. Now, after that, since 1988, they began to broaden the scope and start to sign the second generation of BIT, bilateral investment treaties. That is, they put no limits or restrictions in terms of what investor can do. It's not related to expropriation or nationalization or limited to that. So it opens up a lot of things. Now think about this. It's very important as China becomes an our foreign investor that these kind of bilateral treaties will actually help Chinese investors who try to invest overseas because it's on a bilateral basis. So as a result, the fact that Chinese government opens it up, actually it's beneficial for future investors from China who want to invest in our countries. What they need to do is actually to look at the countries that sign bilateral investment treaties with China and see what kind of deal they have and to see that their investment be protected that way. And so another thing is that Chinese government in recent years also broadened the definition of investment and investors. What that means is that they understand many of their own investors go to tax haven countries. So they say investments from China include indirect control sources. In other words, if the Chinese firm register in Cayman, bring money over, and then invest in the host country, then that's also included, covered by these bilateral investment treaties.